Okay, so let's continue our discussion and introduction to the BEC, the Become Equipped to Communicate resource that you have. You've begun to read, and going to continue that reading here with pages 13 to 18. These are pages that explain some of the principles that you'll use in setting up a routine for yourself as you begin to learn. And so the BEC, it's not like most language learning programs that we would probably immediately think of that we would use in a classroom setting where we go to class and then have that separate lifetime of classroom setting and then do other activities out of the classroom once class is over that are normal routine activities. This is really designed, the BEC is designed to make the most of all of the normal activities of life, the work, social, interaction, other things that you would enjoy doing or that would be a part of the routine, that they all become aspects of the learning experience. So we try to maximize regular life experience in that sense. And in a new cultural setting, we know that the routine of activity like that will take time and take planning to become established for you. But eventually, we want those cultural activities to become a regular part of your routine of life. And so in the earlier days that we are described here in these pages, you'll be planning and thinking carefully as your routine develops and thinking about how to apply yourself in those routine situations to learning. And the guide will certainly give you help for that. One important description in the current section of reading are the 4 different levels of the BEC as a resource. Each level is designed to build on the skills and activities that are relevant to your learning at that point in time, and they each build on each other in areas of language, in areas of culture, and in depth of social relationships too. And then noting at the end of that page that gives those level descriptions, one of the really significant learning principles that's based on the comprehension that we've described earlier, that idea of comprehension-based, is that we listen first and we speak later. Now that's something that doesn't come naturally to most people learning a language. We feel like the measure of our ability is instant production, is instant speaking. And so we want to immediately say everything we're hearing. That's how we tend to think about language learning as a mimicry process. But generally, it's agreed upon nowadays in linguistics theory and acquisition theory that people who are able to listen much more than they speak in the earlier stages of language learning actually have a much better chance of learning the natural intonation and pronunciation of the language, and that they're building an understanding of the core structures, grammatical structures even, that serve as a foundation for later speaking. And so you'll see in what we're going to talk about is level 1. So I said 4 levels, so level 1, 2, 3, 4, each with a particular point of focus or set of points of focus. You'll see in the level 1 activities that the early part of those activities don't require you to speak, to only be listening, and then gradually through the level you'll be introduced appropriately to the time for speaking. So let's talk together a little bit about level 1. Let's introduce that level, the idea of our relating through what's common and familiar to us. And you see that that's taken from pages 19 to 26 in the guide that you should read. And thinking about that idea of us being sort of overwhelmed by the amount of data, and these pages, this level is giving us access to the kind of data, language and cultural information that we can handle at that point in time. There's a couple of common activities that we apply in our day-to-day events in level 1. The 2 most common that we'll talk briefly about here, just as an introduction and followed and reinforced by your reading, is our participant observation and listen and act. And there are varieties of what listen and act as an activity is. it involves both listening, comprehension, and also eventually speaking. So participant observation and listen and act as the two primary activities that we'll use in this section. Now, in the tutorial assignment here, that we'll try to have you apply both of those activities. A participant observation exercise, which is the learning activity number 1 for level 1, and then a listen and act exercise, which is the learning activity 2 there, so that you have some concrete examples to think through as you apply these in another setting at some point. And you know, if you look at the time schedule that's represented in those pages, you'll see that in level 1, a great deal of your time is actually spent in that first activity, in participant observation. It's not just for the beginning stages of learning either, but there's an incremental change over time in the amount of time you spend doing that. It's something that you will spend throughout your whole learning experience. But we hear and read the words participant observation and may ask ourselves, well, what exactly does that mean? What is participant observation? Well, let's talk about that for a minute. Basically, participant observation is what it sounds like, but with the inclusion of the fact that we're learning to relate to others in the experience of their lives culturally and regularly in appropriate ways as we participate and observe with them. And you know, that's not a term that we own or coined. That there is a scientific term that's been used by anthropologists throughout the years of participant observation. One anthropologist, for example, describes participant observation as the primary method used by anthropologists who are doing field work. Another description includes this idea of participant observation as enabling researchers to learn about the activities that occur in this natural setting by participating in them. So that's not a concept, as I've said, that we've created. Another researcher talks about the fact that that's a way that we can be exposed to the day-to-day activities of life, the routine activities of life in any particular research setting. So those points of parallel points are certainly in place for us in what we're trying to accomplish. We want to participate and observe day-to-day life. The major difference for us in the way that we think about participant observation and the way that some anthropologists would define it is the way that we see ourselves as a part of that setting. We don't consider ourselves to be merely or primarily just researchers who are doing an academic study to create an ethnographic description of a culture, for example. That our goal, and it's a challenging goal, but an important and significant part of our lives is that we, over time, as we participate and observe, that we become insiders in the cultural community. That we get to know the people and develop real and close relationships with the individuals there so that we're growing to understand what people think and how they feel from the inside through their perspective so that we're seeing life as much as possible on their terms in the way that they see and experience life. So during level 1, because we really don't have the ability to communicate very much at all, we are simply joining in or being present with people when they are doing the normal activities of life. There's a paradox that occurs in the beginning at times, which we think of as the observer's paradox, which puts us in a place where people are aware of our presence and so they adjust their activities because we're present. But over time, and quite quickly usually, they show us their lives, they reveal their lives to us, they are comfortable with our presence, and they see that we want to learn their language and culture by doing what they're involved in, and so it becomes easier many times for us to narrow down the setting even by just focusing our attention on the few individuals that we're most comfortable with that have overcome that paradox of our presence, and they're willing to allow us to accompany them as they are involved in the various activities of life, shopping, regular activities. So we're not looking for the extraordinary. necessarily. We're looking for regular activities that occur in daily routines, leisure and visit and sport and work and family and paying bills, getting a car fixed, all kinds of activities, even the big ones that we usually think of, but aren't the only activities that are important, like a wedding or a funeral, for example. That these, as we control our environment with just a few individuals, they create circles, concentric circles of opportunity for us to engage with other people and meet more people in those various social environments as well. And so in level 1 particularly, participant observation is just as much about getting to know people as anything else, being able to interact with them in regular events, regular settings, gathering in the process language and cultural information from as much as we can from an objective point of view. And, we do have to be intentional in a situation in that way. We do have to not just cruise or put ourselves on autopilot and mindlessly go through an activity or participate, but we do want to be purposefully observing, listening, jotting down questions and notes, responding to people as we're able to. And the BEC guide gives you some very specific ways to think through that, to note and make observation. Now the second then activity in level 1 is listening and acting. And we've tried, over the course of time, we've tried as much as we can to limit the activities to the ones that we feel are the most effective. And listening and acting certainly is an important part of your learning in level 1, based on theory of learning, acquisition theory, something called TPR, total physical response. This is a method of learning that was developed by an American professor named James Asher. And what it does is it combines physical action or movement with acquisition of language. And so in TPR, just as a generalization, a language helper, a person who's helping another individual to learn, or a tutor, let's say, gives commands in the target language to the learner, and the learner is having to respond to the commands by understanding them and then physically acting, even pointing or actually doing the action. Like the language helper, tutor may say, point to the basket, and the learner is interpreting or understanding what's being said and then acting appropriately, actually pointing to the basket. Or the helper may say, stand up, and the learner is understanding what it means to stand up and therefore is responding with the appropriate action. And so what we're seeing is that this becomes a very effective way to combine hearing with acting and to begin to comprehend and reinforce the comprehension of the common objects, actions, other parts of speech that really become useful foundations for you as a learner as you move forward on that level 1 base. And so a very significant activity for us to participate in. Now, just for your reference then, you should read the next set of pages in the BC, because those pages give a lot more information about participant observation and also how those first learning plans practically work themselves out in level 1. And so you'll need that as you move yourself into the activities that are designed to accompany this particular tutorial.